But the will to act is only part of the story. The other part, and the part I want to spend the most time on today, is this idea of the power to act. And the power to act is this idea of learnership. It's the recognition that there are some challenges, many challenges, that are beyond my current ability, that I just simply can't do at the moment. And what I need to do is raise the bar, learn to become more capable, increase my intelligence, my talents, my abilities, so I'm able to successfully confront those challenges that are beyond my current abilities. When I talk about that, I'm talking about this. Let's imagine this white line over here. This is the challenge that's in front of us. At the moment, it's in my learning zone. That means it's beyond my current abilities. I'm going to struggle, I'm going to fail, I'm going to make mistakes. If I want to be able to succeed at a challenge this difficult, I need to raise the bar again, so it becomes well within my current abilities. And it's this ability to raise the bar that I want to talk about in this last 10 or 15 minutes or so. And it's this idea of learnership. Think of learnership as the skill of learning. When you hear the word learnership, think of it in the same way as you think of craftsmanship or leadership. It denotes a skillfulness. And we've been talking about teacher professional learning now for a good 10 years, where we've focused very heavily on what teachers do in the classroom. In Australia, we have a document that came out, I don't know, about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, the Australian Standards for Professional Teachers, or something along those lines. Might get the words in the wrong order. But it defines what quality teaching looks like. And I've been to a lot of schools where I see a lot of quality teachers, teachers that understand how to set appropriate learning goals, teachers who are very skilled in giving formative feedback to students. And in those very same classrooms, I see the students receive the formative feedback and go, thanks very much, I'm done. I see those same students rely on the teacher to tell them where their learning zone is without taking any control of the learning process themselves. I see teachers going home exhausted because they're the ones doing the most work in the classroom. They're dragging students through the learning process, grabbing hold of that bar that we just talked about, that performance plateau, as Anders Ericsson talks about it, and lifting it up for the student. I was reminded the other day about a quote, and I wish I could reference this quote. If anyone knows where it comes from, let me know. But a mentor of mine shared it with me years ago. And she said, James, never work harder than your students. And I see a lot of teachers working harder than their students. And so what we need to do, we can raise the bar for students. We can push them, pull them, drag them through the learning process. But if at the end of the day, they're relying on us to raise them to a new standard, when we're not around anymore, when they leave the schooling system, that's when their development of agency stops. We need to be going through a process that helps students take control of the learning process and to raise the bar on their own. So what I'd like to do in this last section is describe what learnership is about. And I'm going to share with you the Learnership Matrix that describes 6 different types of learners and breaks it up into 5 different elements of learning. 1 is the student's response to challenge. 2nd is how they develop their habits of mind. The 3rd and 4th is where they get information from, which is about feedback and mistakes. And the last is about what we traditionally call effort, that I've called time and energy, because it's not the time and energy that counts. It's how the time and energy is spent that counts. And here's a quick question for you. And you can ask this in the staff room tomorrow. The next time a student comes up to you with a piece of work that's not where you'd like it to be, which question are you more likely to ask? Are you more likely to ask, how much time did you spend on that? Or are you more likely to ask, how did you spend your time on that? Because they're two very different questions. So let's talk about this idea of learnership. Let me do this and I'll pop into the picture down here and I'll get out of your way. Our non-learners are the sort of learners that avoid challenges. And by the way, as I go through this, try and identify what percentage of your learners fit into each of these different types of learning. A non-learner will, if you give them options A, B, and C, they'll say, do I have to do it? They'd rather do nothing than something. Oh, by the way, I can see people starting to jot this down, which is great. Jane, have you got a copy of the Learnership flyer? We can pop in there as well so people can have a copy of this. And there's also a copy of this in that first document. These students have no language to describe their learning behaviours. They don't have a cognitive anchor to describe what they do. They ignore your feedback and disregard mistakes. And their time is largely wasted. They're doing something other than trying to learn anything new. Now, I don't think we have a lot of non-learners in our classrooms, but this forms a baseline. This is a very passive, inactive learner. Our beginning learners are a little bit better. These are the learners that will reduce a challenge. If you offer them options A, B, and C, they'll say, can I have option D instead? They're always looking for the path of least resistance, the easiest option. They can be busy in class, but they're not working through the sort of challenges you'd want them to. They're the student, and who's got students like this? I hate to admit it, but I used to do this. Very often the teacher would put the hard tasks at the end of the lesson. So I would spend lots of time doing the easy things slowly. So I didn't have time to get onto the hard ones. That's what a beginning learner will do. These learners can describe the habits of mind retrospectively. They sort of fumble through the learning process, just doing what they sort of do. And having done it, they'll go, oh yeah, when I did that problem, I had to ask a question, I had to check my answer. There's no planning, there's no forethought, but there's a little bit of reflection. They recognize mistakes and acknowledge feedback, but they do it like this. That's wrong. There's no further action. They just go, that's wrong. That's not complete, it's not finished. But there's nothing to do after that. And they spend their time doing stuff. These students spend a lot of time getting busy in the classroom, but not getting better. Then our next learner is our performance learner. Now these learners are at least doing their current best. These are the learners that will limit their challenge. And when I say limit their challenge, I mean they do their current best. They're very happy to show you, ta-da, look what I can do. And then you'll say, that's great. Can you try this one? It's a little bit more difficult. And they'll go, ta-da, look what I can do. And they repeat the same standard over and over again without ever risking doing something more difficult that might lead to mistakes and struggle. They can apply their habits of mind with forethought because they've reached that standard before. And to reach that standard again, they're going to have to behave in much the same way. These students avoid mistakes by staying in their performance zone, doing their current best. They select feedback, and this always makes me laugh because who's got students like this? That you give them feedback and they go, oh, thanks miss, that's great. All the things where you've said you've done this well, you've ticked the boxes, and as soon as it gets to the part where you've said, and I think you could do this better, and here's some ideas for improvement, they go, no, I don't want to read those parts. And they spend their time performing. They're the ones that go, I can show you what I can do. I love showing you what I can do, but never stretch and challenge themselves to do better. All three of these learners are what I call below the line learners. They don't actually grow at all, or very little at least. The directed learner is the first learner we actually see significant growth and improvement from. These learners are compliant, And the key characteristic of these learners is that the control of the learning process, the control of raising the bar, lies with the teacher. They'll attempt a challenge that you give them. They'll extend their habits of mind if you tell them that these are the habits that need to be developed and how to do it. They'll correct mistakes after you've pointed it out and told them what they need to do to correct it. They respond to feedback in much the same way, and they spend their time producing. And schools can get great results out of these students. Exhausted, spent teachers, but great results out of these students. The trouble is that they don't control learning. They need someone else to raise the bar for them. And so when they're confronted with challenges beyond their current ability, they need someone else to tell them how to get there. And if we're leaving students to exit school as directed learners, their agency will cease to develop as soon as they're a step away from the teacher. Independent learners take control of the learning process. They can target their own challenges. They know where their learning zone is and they actively go there. They develop the habits of mind. They need to raise the bar. They use mistakes and request feedback, and they spend their time striving. Now, I'll just pop down here. These sorts of learners are great. They're in control of the learning process, but they're selfish in that they set their own learning goals, and they're not terribly responsive. The learners that I think we need to cultivate are these ones, are Agile Learners, which, by the way, just want to mention, I happen to write a book about it called The Agile Learner, and we'll probably send you a link to it at some point. But our Agile Learners embrace challenges. And they embrace challenges in the spirit of JFK when he announced the manned missions to the moon, where he said, we do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. These are the learners that when you say, I've got options A, B, and C, these are the ones that go, which one of those is going to be the most difficult? Which ones of those are going to help me grow the most? Because they're out there embracing challenges to cultivate their habits of mind. They're actively seeking new information by designing mistakes and tailoring feedback. And the key element there is that they're making sure the information is there to be collected. And these learners spend their time growing. Now, we could spend a lot more time in there talking about what it means to be an Agile learner and how we develop learnership. But I wonder, as you went through, where did you see most of your learners? I was doing a workshop yesterday with the Maths Association of Victoria, who, by the way, if you're interested, featured learnership on the front page of their journal, Common Denominator, for last month, and you can get a copy of that from their website. This group I was working with, we did a diagnostic tool that I've got to help identify the sort of learners that they had. 75% of their learners were either non-learners, beginning learners, or performance learners. If our job is to develop agency in students, and remember I started today saying how important this was, this is about empowering students to take meaningful action in a challenging world. If 75% of our students are below the line learners, then we are failing to develop the capacity to develop agency in the student. Some of them were directed learners and will develop agency along the way until they're on their own. It is only the independent and the agile learners that will continue to develop agency throughout life. Now, of course, this is a much bigger topic. Today, I've tried to give you the broad stroke, the big ideas behind this, and to understand the difference between the environment to act, the will to act, and the power to act, and how it's important as school leaders to ensure we're dealing with all three elements: Because too many schools are taking the easy path and focusing only on the environment to act. And even when they do that, they're really just giving students the permission to choose, not changing the students so they have the power to choose something more difficult. So the day after my mindset workshop, I'm doing a learner agency workshop where we'll spend more time talking about mindset and a significant amount of time talking about learnership.